Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you are listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom, with the Lost Voice program, hosted by John Studi and Jacob Nelson.
As our beloved producer was saying, welcome to the Lost Voice Radio. This is Jonathan Studi.
You mean off-air I was saying that?
No, you're not the producer.
Who's a producer?
Dr. Mahfood.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
I guess.
He always does the intro.
He always does the intro. It's the do-do-be-do-do. Welcome to WCAT Radio.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is that he says.
You know what that reminds me of?
What?
It reminds me of the bells to mark the beginning of a school day. I went to public school.
I did too.
Yeah.
The bells that I heard were most like... How does it remind you of bells? Is that what your bells sounded like in St. Paul?
I don't know.
Where'd you go to high school?
St. Paul?
Really?
North St. Paul?
Ooh.
That's better than St. Paul.
Well, I know, but basically anything in St. Paul is kind of downhill.
Whatever. You're so full of garbage.
Whatever.
You're the one wearing a Spider-Man outfit right now.
Hey, fight me. I will web you.
Yes, this is the Lost Voice radio program where we seek to recover the lost voice of wisdom. However, one of us is wearing a Spider-Man costume.
And it has wings for some reason. I do not know why the Spider-Man costume has wings.
I want to just make clear, this is not a costume for Halloween. These are your pajamas.
These are my pajamas.
Middle of the day.
Middle of the day. Well, here's the deal, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta put Michael to sleep.
Right.
And he has Spider-Man pajamas that actually match these ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fun.
And so sometimes the only way I can, or one of the ways that we do it is I'll do something with him like this. And so today I wore our matching Spider-Man pajamas.
Nice.
Except that they're a size too small.
Oh.
That's why my arm's a little short.
You know, this is a great tip for me for when Matthias starts doing stuff like that. As an excuse to buy, like, an Iron Man outfit. Yeah. And then, Studi, you and I can go on adventures together.
Well, you know what we did with Paul and Zimmich, right? One year we got Paul Batman one piece pajama set like this, and then we got Justin Robin. And the best part is it's got these like short shorts that go up to here, and the rest is like naked to not nude tone leg.
Up to here means nothing to our listeners, but you should all know Justin, and then Paul is a
major seminarian at St. Paul Seminary right now.
Yeah, but he
up to here is like high thigh, and so it looks like Justin's wearing booty shorts. Poor kid.
Why do people,
and it actually matches his skin tone.
Why do people listen to us? For great stories like this.
Yeah, wonderful stories.
We're not just about the truth here. We're about the truth and fun.
We are, and that's a part of living the human experience, you know?
True.
Having fun.
Risibility.
It's inherent to the human species.
Yes.
In fact, Thomas specifically addresses that in De Ente et Essentia as something that's an inherent quality to humans.
Is God risible?
No.
I agree.
Good, I agree too. With my own statement.
God understands our sense of humor and even uses our sense of humor at times, but sure. God himself, since he's perfectly reasonable, nothing could get him off guard in such a manner that would...
And it's these kind of speculations that cause us to actually lose our sense of humor. Nobody else thinks we're funny. No, I'm serious. I used to be a lot funnier, and then I got more into philosophy, and then I started realizing other jokes, like, did I ever tell you my Descartes joke?
I think I might have told you this Descartes joke first.
It was my Descartes joke. No, it's not that one.
Oh,
it's this one.
Which one?
So complicated. Hold on.
Oh, no, you told us this on a trip, and everybody in the car
just, like, paused.
Had no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
But go ahead, entertain our listeners.
Descartes painted himself into such an epistemological trap that he had to invent God, or he had to come up with an argument for God's existence, so that he could actually say that the external world is something that we really experience rather than a product of our minds or some sort of great demon. He literally had to create a deus ex machination. Now, for you listeners up there who are wondering what this means.
By the way, I'm laughing not at the joke, but at the look you just gave me.
Because it's a look like I know how bad this is and how nobody understood it.
Yep.
Long story short, Descartes' epistemology, or his method, was his universal methodic doubt, in which he posited some sort of demon-type entity that was no less deceitful than he was powerful, who deceives us into thinking that the outside world is something that we truly experience. So he came up with his argument for God's existence. In fact, he had two. He had the famous "I think, therefore I am," and then from that "I think, therefore I am," he realized that it's a contingent thing, and then he kind of went off of Thomas's second way. The other one was his famous ontological argument that God is a being that nothing can be thought of as greater. Ergo, if he doesn't exist, then there's a being that could be greater. Therefore, the greatest maximal being, greatest possible being, God, must exist. But in any case, so he invents this argument for God's existence, and it says that God is good, and that he's too good to allow us to be deceived, and then it combines it with the old Greek expression Deus ex machina, which means God out of the machine. Get what I'm saying here? God out of the machine, which is where the writers would paint themselves into a corner where they're stuck in terms of the plot. And in order to get them out of that, like Athena or Zeus comes down, like just does their magic and solves everything. It's kind of like watching a sitcom. They always have this unsolvable problem,
right?
But then in 30 minutes, it's all fine, and everybody's giving each other hugs and everybody's laughing. And then the machination part, this is particularly brilliant, I think. Because machination means, like, it can mean either physically chewing on something, or it can mean metaphorically, I almost said ruminating on something, which is basically the same, it's very similar to machination, but it's you thinking about something.
Right.
And so because Descartes' argument for God's existence comes out of his thought, I think, therefore I am, he gets the Deus ex machinations to solve his doubts.
Oh my goodness!
I think sideways. We established this last. Was it this last show I said I think sideways?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
Are you just confused? And scared? I'd be scared if I were you. I'm scared right now.
I'm scared not of you.
Oh.
You know, that's the thing, is that you would assume I'm scared of you. What I'm really scared of is my own judgment for associating with you freely.
Would you rather be feared or loved?
I want people to love me so much they're afraid of loving me. They're afraid of how much they love me.
I love that.
Thank you, Michael Scott.
Oh, that's good. He's got some great quotes.
So, the other Descartes joke, I can't say it's mine because I know a lot of other people have thought of it or said it. But Rene Descartes walks into a bar and he has a drink, and the bartender asks him, "Mr. Descartes, would you like another?" He goes, "I think not." And then he disappears.
And thus, Mr. Descartes met his demise.
Yes.
You know, at one point in his life... Okay, this is going to be weird. Never mind.
Of course it is. It's the Lost Voice radio program. Of course it's going to be weird.
I think this was Descartes. He was, at one point, rumored to have a mistress who was actually a robot.
Oh, boy.
No, I'm serious. This is a real thing.
It's not just some stupid joke you came up with? Like Deus Ex Machina?
No, 100% real.
Okay.
Because of the mechanical universe that he believed in. Because he believed in the res cognitans, which is the thinking thing, and immaterial. But then he thought of everything else, which was res extensia, which is the extended thing. And he only viewed He viewed non-intelligent things simply as operating mechanically according to Newton's laws of physics.
Okay.
And so he only saw things like animals as just like cold automatons. And so for Descartes, he actually argued that, and you'll see this in the Meditations, that animals don't experience pain. They don't actually experience pain. They only go through it. Because pain, the quality sensation of pain, is something that can only be understood and comprehended by something with a mind. Or something with a non-material existence, because you can't put pain in a centrifuge and say, here it is. You can say, here are the chemicals associated with pain, but the experience itself is immaterial. And so we thought that these animals, which are purely immaterial, could not have those kind of experiences. Right. But it's not purely immaterial. Right. You need to be a better scholastic. That's one of the things I found interesting about reading Descartes. Was like he was he used some of the scholastic terminology, but he wasn't quite using it right. And it drove me nuts reading.
Well, that's because he was a mathematician, not a philosopher.
Right. I think that's one of his main issues, was that he was seeking such clarity and perspicuity to the natural world that he expected things of the higher order to be able to have the same kind of clarity as our understanding of the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that runs through a lot of the modern philosophers, is that they're actually looking for a philosophical system that is as clear and as distinct, which is Descartes' big thing, as the physical, as the mathematical physics that were becoming very popular at the time, especially with Newton.
Right.
Anyway, but I think that's an error because we live in an analogical world, for one. Everything's a little bit similar to something else. There's never a direct correlation. And second, there are some things which are simply beyond our ability to fully grasp.
Like you.
Understand. Right. I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. The words are just coming out, and I'm hoping that they actually are strung together in a coherent thought.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's a quote from Joseph Ratzinger I would like to throw in here. Because you're talking about, like, basically people obfuscate terms in the name of clarity. So, like, I want to be...
everything contrades.
Right. So, like, we want to make this problem clear, so let's confuse all the terminology to make it clear, which is insane, right?
Right.
Let's make things fuzzy and gray to somehow make it clear. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm reading a work that Joseph Ratzinger, he didn't actually do. It's 2 speeches he gave in America well before he was Pope. The work it's published by Ignatius Press, a compilation of 2 speeches he gave. It's called On Conscience, I think it was.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think you're telling me.
Very good. And in it, he tells a joke, but it's a joke that only people like you and I would appreciate.
But other people with a sense of humor wouldn't.
It's very wry humor.
Kind of like Father Hogan. Do you remember Father Hogan's jokes?
Yeah.
Oh, they were horrible.
So he says, I find it funny that moral theologians and people of today so quickly discount the very, very, very narrow ability of the Pope to speak infallibly. And in the same breath, they assign infallibility to everybody's conscience.
That's hysterical.
I laughed out loud when I read it.
It's so
true, though.
It's so true, and it's so revelatory of the heart of man.
Right. Well, for people to say, well, geez, the Pope can't speak infallibly, that's insane. Well, there's such a narrow circumstance in which the Pope speaks infallibly. But then to say, well, if that's not possible, but what is possible is everybody to be infallible.
Yeah, their own conscience must be always the guide.
How ridiculous.
Let your conscience be the guide. Yeah, it's a Jiminy Cricket theology right there.
Yeah.
That's the right song, right?
I don't know.
Let your conscience be your guide.
I don't know what
that's
you're talking
about. That's gotta be
about.
it. From Pinocchio! Didn't you have a childhood?
I did, but you know how long ago that childhood was?
Hold on.
I don't remember Pinocchio.
Yeah, that's it. Hold on.
Oh, I just looked at the time. We're up to 13 minutes of nonsense.
No, Jake. This is important. Man, we got a commercial. Stupid YouTube. All right, hold on.
Well, while you're loading that, listeners, we are going to talk about something of substance today. We are talking about holy orders. Oh, here we go.
But, gonna get a badge or something?
Well, we'll see.
You mean maybe it will?
I shouldn't wonder.
Make it a gold one?
Maybe.
What are you playing?
This
Now
is
remember,
Pinocchio.
Be a good boy. And
See,
always
this is-
let your conscience be your guide.
Huh? It's the fairy?
Is it God or guide?
No, that's the good fairy guide.
Guide, okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
I mean, we should let our conscience be our guide. This isn't about conscience. Is that what we're talking about? Just kidding. I know what we're talking about.
Holy orders, buddy.
I wasn't even listening. Were you? Did you tell the listeners what we're there?
Almost forgot.
Yeah, we're going to talk about holy orders
Okay.
today.
I'm glad you told me halfway through the show.
Maybe you and I had
You
better
told
talk
me
about
like
it.
3 days ago this is what we were doing. It's not my fault if you forget.
Yes, it
Wanna be
is.
a real boy?
You
You'll-
bamboozled
You're
me.
All right. Sit down.
All right, I'm done with this.
Please.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Long story short, by your godmother says, let your conscience be your guide. I had an argument with the priest on that one once.
Well, St. Thomas
Was
does
heated.
say that you have an obligation to follow your conscience even when it errs. But that presupposes your pursuit of synderesis and moral general principles or first principles to form your conscience. I came across a moral theologian in this state who went to a Catholic institution in Minnesota. I'm not going to name names because I'm not like you, and I don't like to throw people under the bus on air. However,
who have I thrown under the bus?
Many people.
However, that one guy
this
from
particular
USCCB.
moral, this particular moral theologian said, everybody's conscience ultimately is what it's the final arbiter of what is moral. And you have an obligation to follow your conscience, which we do have an obligation to follow our conscience with the distinction of that we pursue the right formation, that we actually seek to form our conscience. Which, Studi, can you name me maybe one or two things that would be good formators of our conscience?
Well, first of all, I need to correct you on something, Jake.
No. Don't play this game. Stay on track.
You were talking about the wrong Disney show. You said it's Pinocchio. What did you say about
Cinderesis?
Cinderella? Cinderella, okay. So, first of all, understanding the right Disney programming would be one. Secondly...
I didn't say anything about Cinderella.
You just said that!
I said Cinderesis.
I know, it's a bad pun. I'm sorry, listeners.
Oh, that's not even a pun.
It kind of is cinder. Come on. Okay, read the Catechism.
Catechism would be good. Can you name a second one?
Can I name a second one? Oh... The Compendium for the Social Doctrine of the Church.
Sure. You could say the Summa, you could say the Baltimore Catechism, the Old Roman Catechism. There's lots of things. But you know what's funny, Studi?
The New York Times.
I was just going to say, you didn't mention the New York Times. Or the Washington Post, but this moral theologian said those are good formators.
You know what's funny? I remember you telling me about this, but I forgot about it until like 2 seconds ago. And someone I said New York Times.
Oh my goodness!
Well, it was like there's a philosophy professor in North Hennepin who, instead of having us read things like Aristotle and Socrates and even like
good
freaking
things.
Peter Singer, all right? I mean,
Peter Singer's an idiot.
He is, but he is a really consistent idiot.
That's fair.
And a nice guy, despite the fact that he wants to kill babies. Or is
not
okay
just
with
babies,
it.
but like 3-year-olds.
I know, it's sickening.
Yeah,
very sickening.
Yeah.
Apparently he's a nice guy. But anyway, he would have us read...
You know, he is a nice guy. You know why? The Latin word for nice... Lisa, go ahead and email us. The Latin word for nice means know nothing. I think it's pronounced like Neshwa.
Do you know what the Latin word for agnostic is?
No.
Ignoramus. Speaking of ignoramus. Mooses. Bullwinkle. No, I'm serious.
I feel like you're working on a bridge to Holy August right now.
Bullwinkle was a Canadian.
Okay.
And Canadians are French. The French are the first children of the church. And the children of the church are born through the waters of baptism, and they are sustained through the Eucharist, which is confected by God's holy priests.
That's interesting, because the bridge I would have gone with is that you were talking about agnostics who are in some way closely related to atheists. Now,
and a lot
liberals,
of French people are atheists.
Now they are. But liberals oftentimes are practical atheists because they want to do away with many things having to do with God. Now, liberals and atheists right now in Michigan are trying to get rid of the monument, which is a white cross that marks where Father Marquette died. Father Marquette is a wonderful priest, missionary priest, who explored the Mississippi River and essentially founded Catholicism in the Midwest, but not just Catholicism. He really contributed to a lot of the cultural growth of the time and societal growth. And so now, because of their stupid and errant attack on crosses, they're getting rid of a whole cultural history of the Midwest because they hate the priesthood. So what could they hate about the priesthood? Because the priest is in persona Christi. So that's my bridge.
It's kind of like how Satanists don't steal Eucharistic hosts from Eucharistic hosts.
They don't steal communion wafers.
They don't steal communion wafers from Protestant churches, only Catholic churches.
Yeah.
Something interesting about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Almost like, the Eucharist is...
Wait, weren't we going to have a former Satanist on our show?
Oh, I got to line that up. You're right.
Hey!
I was waiting for his book to get published.
Oh, has it not been published yet?
I don't know. We'll find out later.
Dr. Mafuda always sends out info. All right. Anyway, so the priesthood.
Yes.
It does things.
It does a lot of things.
Mostly sacramental things.
Well, yeah.
They're sacrament machines. That's what, who was it? I think Father Eisen actually said that.
A sacrament
Yeah,
machine.
it's a sacrament machine. A deadly one, in Father Eisen's case. Okay, that can't be true.
So you're throwing people under the bus.
I'm throwing him under the bus because he's like a good priest.
So you're telling me you throw good people under the bus.
No. I'm
What
throwing,
kind of monster
I'm not throwing him
are
under the
you?
bus. So St. Augustine once cried out to the Lord in the confession, saying, "Kill me, Lord, that I may live." That's exactly what Father Eisen does. Is he will kill the old man and renew your life through the grace of the sacrament.
So why are you throwing him under the bus?
I'm not throwing him under the bus. I'm saying he's a great priest.
But
'cause
you
he
said
affects
you throw good priests under the bus. That's what you said. Your words, not mine. We could go back on the
because
tape.
he's a great priest.
But so you would kill a great individual that may or may not be a priest because they're great?
No. I didn't say I'd throw a great priest under the bus. It's just a good one.
Well, we're up to a third of our show being completely nonsensical. I feel like we should probably get to some topic.
All right, fine.
If we haven't lost all our listeners by now.
Well, this is what they stay for. They can get theology anywhere. They can't get us
Anywhere.
Not even here. Dr. Mafu, turns out Dr. Mafu doesn't actually share our post.
He just sends us fake numbers.
Well, it's a good one. We'll keep them quiet for a while.
The priesthood.
Yes.
We do not have a Levitical priesthood. It is not a priesthood of hereditary lineage.
Mm-hmm.
To priesthood by participation.
Via participatio. I like that because it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of research on the metaphysics of participation as of late. I'm not going to talk about that.
Good.
Because it's kind of a big topic.
Yeah.
And it would take us off track. But we don't have a Levitical priesthood. You're right. However, the Levitical priesthood does foreshadow the priesthood of Christ in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Interesting enough, the Levitical priesthood is actually even broken up into 3 sections, just like our holy orders is.
How about that?
I know, right? It's like God foreshadows things. So you had the high priests, you had the Levites, and then you had the priests, the Aaronites, and just as we have the bishops, deacons, and priests.
Yes.
Although in the New Testament, the word that's used is presbyter rather than I think it's like hagiaso or something like that. I don't know what it is in Greek for the word priest, but. In either case, it is foreshadowed, and even much of their ministry foreshadows what the priesthood of the New Covenant was supposed to do, which is to offer sacrifices to the Lord,
right?
And also be a mediator between man and God, in terms of the covenant to effect the forgiveness of sins. We see this in the book of Leviticus, for instance, when there's a sin offering that needs to be offered. The person brings their offering before the Lord and confesses their sins to the priest, and then it gives the priest, this is Leviticus 5:6-8, gives the priest the sacrifice, and then the priest sacrifices it for the man. This is what we see in the New Testament, too.
Right.
We see some of those same sorts of actions, like in James 5. 13-16, it talks about how if anyone among you is sick, let him call together the elders, presbyter, goes in English priests, and he will be anointed with oil, and then the prayer of the righteous man will save the sick man, and his sins will be forgiven. Therefore, and you always have to ask in Scripture, if you see therefore, what is it there for?
Right.
It's like an old Protestant saying there. Therefore, confess your sins to one another. And this is one of the most interesting things. I mean, this is not about the sacrament of confession in general today, but just one little note. In the early church, the practice was to confess your sins in front of the entire congregation.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Let's save that because the early church practice of confession is fascinating, and we'll get to that in a couple weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
In either case, we see the forgiveness of sins as an aspect of the priesthood, but they also see the action of sacrifice too with the Holy Mass, when Jesus said, he takes the bread, breaks it, and then pours out the wine. We're actually seeing the same sort of ritual that you'd see for a sin offering, or even more in particular the Passover, where you break the body of the animal that you're sacrificing and you pour out its blood on the altar.
Right.
This is exactly what priests do. And Jesus says, "Do this in memory of me."
Yes.
This is actually one of the things that I talk about with.
And we'll get to anamnesis when we get to
talk
the
about
Eucharist.
the Eucharist. Yeah, this will relate to the priesthood or the liturgy in general, even. But
right.
One of the things I often tell my kids is that in terms of Protestants, they always talk about how we are supposed to be living by Scripture alone. We need to follow after the Bible, and that's it. That's our rule of faith. But what's interesting is that Jesus never, again, commands us to write anything down. Never commands the disciples to do such a thing. Nor does any disciple do that. Nor does any disciple do that. Bless you.
Thank
In the name
you.
of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
No, don't imitate a priest. That's sacrilege.
You're sacrilege.
Jeez. That's kind of harsh.
I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't remember the words that Paul used to say. He used to say like, "He who has nothing can give nothing," or whatever. And that's basically what I was going to say. But anywho, but what he did tell us is to offer sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the prophet Malachi who talks about how, or was it Amos, who talks about from the east to the west, a new sacrifice will be offered in your holy name. It's a bloodless sacrifice that's supposed to be offered. Mm-hmm. And a sacrifice in the Old Testament system, or the Old Covenant system, or the understanding of the Jewish mindset, is always wrapped up within the understanding of the priesthood.
Right.
Otherwise, if you move away from the priesthood and start offering sacrifices, you see some terrible things happen.
Like an Old Testament thurible consuming somebody in fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great story?
Yeah. Or who was it that touched the ark and instantly died?
Yeah, it was Uzzah.
Yeah.
Doing the ministry of the Levites, and he wasn't supposed to be doing that.
Well, there's another one who touched the ark because it was falling.
Yeah, it's Uzzah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he wasn't doing... That's what I mean. He had good intentions,
right.
Good motives, but he worked against God's structure.
You know what's funny about good intentions?
What?
Well, there's an old phrase. The path to hell is paved in good intentions.
Do you know who said that?
Who?
C.S. Lewis. It's in the Screwtape Letters.
It's a great book.
It is a wonderful
I
book.
love the Screwtape Letters.
It is probably one of my favorite books.
Yeah. Not for the faint of heart.
No.
If you...
Mulder refuses to read it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
What do you get distracted by?
Maybe.
I don't know. You just started looking at something.
No.
It's like a fuzzy in the air. What's going on?
What are you talking about? Anyway, priesthood.
Priesthood. Shake.
What?
We are derailing. This show is a train.
You know what? You are the quarter that's on the track that derails the train.
1 quarter?
Yeah.
Just one?
Yes.
2 quarters?
Just one.
Okay.
And that was 3 fingers when you said 2.
I know. It made me laugh.
All right. So, Studi,
yes.
you said something earlier, and I want to quiz you.
Okay.
How many holy orders are there?
1 holy orders. 1 sacrament of holy orders, but there's different distinctions or outpourings of those graces.
Yes. 3 degrees.
Yeah.
So we talk about you're distracting me.
I'm sorry.
You're what I'm looking at. That's so distracting.
Me in my Spider-Man outfit?
Yes.
Ooh, I have a great analogy for this.
There's 1 holy order, but there's 3 ordinations because it's an admittance into 3 different orders of service.
Sure. Go on with that. Go on.
Okay.
Tell us about the 3 different levels of holy orders.
Yes.
I'll tell you all about things in a second.
Okay.
I have a great analogy.
All right. So before Studi's analogy, the 3 orders, we can think of it as a threefold blossoming of the one ordination. At a man's initial ordination, there is an indelible mark put on that man's soul, which marks him in persona Christi. First, in persona Christi, the servant. So deacons are called to serve. The word deacon means to serve. Excuse me, or diaconia is called to serve. And then the priesthood, again, a new ordination. And then to the episcopacy or bishop. And that's yet another ordination. But through those 3 ordinations, it's all one holy order. There's not a multiplicity of orders. It's a blossoming of the one order, the 3 separate degrees of those orders. Now, I'm sure, Studi, in a few moments, you're going to talk about the necessity of the male-only priesthood, which I know you have a fascinating analogy or a fascinating, not an analogy, the male-only priesthood theory of why it's male-only, which we'll get to in a minute.
I mean, we can get to that one.
Yeah.
But in terms of the orders...
Yes, your analogy.
My analogy. Somebody once asked me what it, like, is a priest a deacon? Is a bishop a priest? Or is a bishop a deacon? The answer is yes. In fact, Paul actually calls himself a deacon in one of the epistles. I can't remember quite which one it is.
Well, I just got, we're talking about the word deacon means servant.
Right.
And actually, the deacon at the parish where I work, he wrote up a nice article about why it's necessary that a deacon is at the altar. Because one priest, he was at a conference, and a priest said, well, a priest could just as easily do everything a deacon does. Why does a deacon need to be there? He said, because the deacon is in persone Christe servium. I don't know the Latin. I'm sure Lisa will email in. But Christ he's in the person of Christ the servant, whereas the priest is in the person of Christ the high priest. To go on.
I like that.
Yes.
Well, the priest still does act as a servant, which is one of the reasons why you call the Pope the servant of the servants of God.
Right.
Because he's reached maximal servitude.
Yes.
Which does relate a little later. So the way I likened it to one of those babushka dolls, you know?
What's a babushka doll?
I don't think it's called babushka dolls, but they're like little old ladies, and they open up, and then...
Nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls? Or they're called babushka dolls?
I don't know. Maybe in your world they're called babushka dolls, but they're nesting
dolls in the real world.
Yeah.
In the land of the noumena. Not the phenomenon.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Kant. Remember we talked about nonsense words?
Yeah.
People who say things to make it confusing. It pissed me off so much when I read Kant the first time. Like, what did he say? Then I read it again. Like, why didn't he say it this way?
Yeah.
Anyway, but
Kant has some good stuff though too.
He does. He's very interesting.
He's also very annoying.
His sophistry is his brilliance, actually.
Yeah.
Anywho, so that's how I likened that. But so you'd like me to talk about my mad theory?
Did you ever get to the analogy?
That was my analogy. The babushka dolls. Oh yeah, the babushka dolls. So like you have a bishop. And
you mean the nesting dolls?
Nesting dolls, yeah. Inside the bishop is yet another. Oh my goodness, bishop. No joking. It's a priest. Inside the priest,
I prefer to just think of it as a blossoming or a flowering of the vocation that was entered into it at the initial ordination.
That's too flowery. What are you, Saint Teresa Sue? Come on.
She's a doctor of the church. Last time I checked, there's not a babushka doll related to the doctors of the church.
Not yet. Maybe I'll be a doctor of the church someday. No.
No, you desperately need a doctor of the church. And a regular doctor.
And a psychiatric doctor.
A psychoelectric doctor?
Yes. Somebody to help me with my firing neurons that just kind of just shoot off randomly, you know?
Okay, so before we get to your theory of the male-only priesthood, we should preface this with saying that this actually does make sense. Don't look at it through the lens of thinking Studi's insane and let that taint this. Because I actually think this is pretty good.
Yeah.
But if somebody listens to you regularly, they might not take your theories seriously just knowing the random stuff that pops out of your head.
But it's genius. This
particular one I would say is pretty genius.
Oh, you'd actually say it's genius? That's nice, Jake.
Well, I wanted to build you up after I tore you down.
That's the best thing anybody's ever said to me ever.
Wow.
That you wanted to build me up if you tore me down. Most people just leave it at the tear down. And never mind. I'll tell you that one story later. Okay, so I think a part of the reason why I can come up with good ideas is because I think in a very strange way and I just see odd connections.
Mm-hmm. I'm likewise with me, however, I'm very methodical.
Sure.
I'm very systematic in my thinking, but I have a very different perspective, so I come up with really good ways of looking at things, help people figure out good ways of dealing with their situations. You come up with really awesome and interesting theories, but it's like, I think the difference would be, mine is like lasagna. It's perfectly layered and very intentional. Yours is like spaghetti thrown at a wall. It's all there, it's all intertwined, but nobody can really make sense of it.
Oh no, people can make sense of it, Jake. Speaking of lasagna, Molly made some delicious lasagna the other day. I ate all of it today, otherwise I'd give it to you.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so the way that I think is I often jump to the conclusion that I want to think about, or like I'll see it before I even understand all the steps to it.
Right.
And then I work backwards.
Yeah.
To a
Yeah, it's all right.
And so, long story short, male only priesthood. Mm-hmm. This is a very hot topic. Obviously,
it is.
It's been hotly debated. It's been intensely debated for a good number of years, particularly since some post-Vatican II feminist takeovers of certain aspects of at the educational establishment within the church, and in recent years been women who have somehow ordained themselves priestesses, which I really don't understand that one.
Oh yeah, there's some bad music videos that go along with that.
What?
Oh yeah.
Oh, we're watching these. We can do it after the show. We can do it during the show too. That's fine. But Peter Kreeft, I want to say one thing. So very often, what it is that the women priests will argue that it's just men that have the power in the church. Mm-hmm. Men have the authority. Men have the strength. Men are the ones in charge, and that it's not fair that women don't have that same kind of position within the church. Well, I think there's two errors with that. One, anybody who's worked in the church understands that men are in charge. God's in charge for one, obviously, but it's the women who run the parish. They're the ones who volunteer. They're the ones who are at the front desk. They're the ones who are making sure all the T's are crossed and that the I's are dotted, and that that the social situation that is absolutely necessary for the church to run is being run well. Secondly, and more profoundly, I think, anybody who seeks after the priesthood because they're seeking after a position of power doesn't deserve the priesthood. They've automatically disqualified themselves from it.
Say that again?
Anybody who seeks after the priesthood or holy orders for the sake of the power or the authority that comes from it.
Yeah, but I think
you've more or less disqualified yourself in terms of personality.
I don't think every woman who's seeking the priesthood is simply for power. I think they genuinely want to serve.
Sure, I'm saying, but there are some.
Yeah,
certainly.
But there are some men that do.
Well, right,
and they're idiots.
They are idiots.
Like certain Jesuits who are promoting homosexual unions and things of that sort.
Man, just hold on one second here, James. It's actually pretty good. In any case, male-only priesthood.
Yes.
So, it's supposed to be a position of power, according to this feminist theory.
Sure.
But it's actually the opposite. Because that's what we were talking about.
It's a position of service.
It's a position of service, right.
And a complete forsaking of one's power.
Complete forsaking of one's power. Laying one's life down for the bride, and the bride of all humanity. And this, for me, goes back to the creation story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the creation story and you compare it to the sacraments, what you notice is that the sacraments actually have a reparative effect on the various aspects of the fall, whether it be an action or a consequence. And St. Augustine, in arguing for the fittingness of the Incarnation, talked about how a doctor will always apply the right medication or the right bandage to fit the wound or to fit the illness. Mm-hmm. And God, being the great divine physician, is going to perform no worse than any natural physician. And so one of the so let's think about it for a second. What does baptism do? It washes away original sin, and it makes you a new creation in the order of grace. Mm-hmm. It does it through the power of the Holy Spirit, and through the Word. And we see this right in the beginning. God's Holy Spirit hovered over the face of the waters, right? And then God spoke and said, "Let there be light." And so the light comes into creation. And so in the same way, with the Holy Spirit, with the waters of baptism, the light of Christ comes into our lives. Mm-hmm. With the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I think this one relates particularly well to the Eucharist. There's a tree, and man reaches up and grasps the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, which I think we've talked about on the show before, represents for us the usurpation of God's position as the one who makes those moral commands and issues dictates what's right and wrong for humanity and for the whole of the cosmos. But instead, what Adam and Eve do is they reach and take that for themselves out of vain pride. And And what the Eucharist does is it completely flips that. And Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit. And so in the same way, Christ, the God of the universe, comes down to a tree and offers himself in service to others. And it's that same Christ that was offered as a servant that came down to be a slave to us.
Right.
That we receive in the Eucharist, and so it's supposed to undo that pride and undo that flipping over of the universe, the order of creation, the order of authority.
Yeah.
And we see this with basically all the sacraments, I think. And one thing in particular that we see in the Book of Genesis is that is a curse that Eve receives, and that's that the man would lord over him. Okay, now keep that in mind. So the man's going to lord over him.
Right.
But Adam, earlier in the Bible, was commanded by God to till and to keep the garden. And the Hebrew words there, I'm not going to get into detail, for till and to keep, are actually the same words that are applied later in the Old Testament to the service of the temple for the priesthood. And essentially what it means is to protect and to guard, and to do the work of the ministry, and to worship.
Right.
And so that was Adam's job, and he was supposed to defend his bride, who Eve, who was called Eve because she is the mother of all the living, was supposed to be kind of like is a crown of creation, and who else should he protect with more fervency than his own bride?
Right.
And so Adam fails in this sense, and because he failed in this, the order of his nature became so disordered, became so out of alignment, so corrupted, that it got to the point where it's no longer that he is not simply failing to protect his bride, but and till and to keep the garden, to do the work and service of God, but he's actively oppressing her. And I think this is something that we see throughout much of human history, is that men tend to be oppressors of women. They tend to be those who assert their own physical dominance or whatever.
Well, and some of this you could even see as implicit in the dialogue between Eve and the serpent, because God commands Adam, "Do not eat from the tree lest you die." And what does Eve respond to the serpent? "I'm not supposed to eat nor touch lest I die." Well, God spoke to Adam. How did Eve get the command? It likely was from Adam. And so either the adding in the "do not touch" came from Eve's own mind, or Adam, loving his bride but being overprotective and overbearing, added it in. Don't eat it, but you know what? Don't even touch it, honey. And he's taken upon himself to add words to God's command that weren't initially there. Now, that's simply a theory. I think it's a good one because, as a man, I want to protect those around me, and sometimes that desire to protect becomes overbearing. But it's not an overbearing out of power, but out of love. But regardless of the motivation, it's still not proper to the act of protection. So,
right. No, I agree. That's interesting. Seeing it begin even before the actual consuming of the fruit.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who say that Eve's sin began before she actually grasped the fruit.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, you could say the same thing about Adam, perhaps, in the situation.
Yeah.
But in either case, so with Eve, it's implicit. Your husband will lord over you. That the husband is going to be the perpetrator of this violence.
Yeah.
And now we are very well aware that somebody who's the oppressed is not committing any sin by being oppressed in itself, but the person who is doing that is the one who's committing a sin. And this is a struggle that man has in particular.
Yeah.
And so within the order of creation, within the order of the relationship between God, or within the order of relationship between man and the rest of creation, and the order relationship between man and the protection of humanity itself, there's a failure, there's a wound. And so what God does is within the sacramental order, he offers with the sacraments of social unity a way for men to have a particular medicine to heal them of this wound.
Right.
Which gives them a special grace to become a servant.
So the healing is the complete sacrifice of power in the name of service of mankind.
Right, and it's only man qua man, or male qua male, that has this particular curse.
So wait, let me get this straight. Songs like this don't apply?
I had a dream as a girl, like Therese of Lisieux. I need to give this a whirl so I can lead the way.
Your face is perfect.
Women preaching for all. Don't listen to St.
Hold on.
Paul, 'cause I can
Don't
lead
listen
the
to St.
way.
Paul.
My minister's growing. Excommunication, I'm still glowing. M-div, just for blowing. Where you think the church is going? Hey, I was baptized, and this is crazy. But God just called me, so I date a lady. Just as justified. With male priest, but God just called me.
So this isn't accurate, is what you're telling me. Your jaw being on the ground right now in shock is telling me that this might not be accurate. Should I keep it going? You're frozen. Studi, you're speechless. That's all I had to do.
Well, she's a bad singer for one, so that kind of irritates me. Okay, well, there's a couple of things here. Hold on one second.
By the way, I do have another story today. We have 15 minutes left.
Okay, I'll finish up here. So, long story short, man has a particular wound. Each of the sacraments heals a part of the wound or contributes to the new creation that Christ wants to establish on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And because man has that particular wound of dominance when he was supposed to be a servant, Christ gives him a supernatural way to go above and beyond what was even given to Adam in the garden as a mission.
Right.
Because male is no longer supposed to care for simply the human race, but it's going in his bride. In the natural order, but on the supernatural order, he's supposed to stand in the person of Christ, caring for the bride of Christ, who, like Adam's wife Eve, coming from his own side, the bride of Christ comes from the side of Christ on the cross when the blood and water flowed forth, which represent baptism in the Eucharist, and which the priest is the ordinary minister of those sacraments. In any case. So basically the idea here is, again, that there's a specific wound and God gives a specific medicine to man in order to overcome that wound.
Right. Another thing to consider, too, is if Christ established all sacraments, because Christ is the one who the Holy Spirit effects all of the sacraments, but Christ institutes all of them, then we have to follow Christ's lead. We have to do what he did, and he called 12 men. Now, some claim that Christ was simply following the patrimony of the time, or the patriarchal society of the time. But the thing is...
Which is, of course, they accuse Christ of sin.
Right. Also, the Jews, they were a patriarchal society. However, they were much more accommodating to women than all of the other nations around them at the time.
Sure.
But the other thing to consider is that if Christ came to establish the truth, he would have done anything he wanted. I mean, he died. He suffered immensely at the hands of a lie. The Jews lied about what he did. Mm-hmm. And this is not an anti-Semitic talk, just to be clear. This is just historical fact. What the Jews presented to Pontius Pilate was not accurate in terms of what Jesus was actually saying and doing. It was distorted. So if he was going to just follow society at the time, it falls apart at the very interview of Pontius Pilate. However, if Christ wanted women to be priests, he had more reason to ordain a woman than a man. 11 out of the 12 disciples or apostles left him. Mm-hmm. Mary Magdalene did not, and he also made his mother the Queen of Heaven.
Right.
Who more fitting to be a priest than the Queen of Heaven? And yet there is something that didn't work.
You'll note that the men alone were in the upper room during the Last Supper. And even dogmatically speaking, the church has put a very firm foot down on this.
Yes.
And the 2004 document Ordinatio Sacerdotales.
Well, it was even earlier than that.
This is like a formal declaration. John Paul II.
Yeah, I thought
Was
you
it
wrote
really?
that earlier than that.
Oh, I think it was 2004.
Oh.
It was right before his death.
Okay.
He said that he basically said that the church has no authority to ordain a woman, and then then Pope Benedict
reaffirmed
that and said this is invoking the infallible office of the Pope.
Yeah, and the language is quite clear. Maybe we can do that next week. Right now, speaking of John Paul, perfect segue without us talking. Today for Jake's Story Corner.
Jake's Story Corner.
Yes. I wanted to read something about the priesthood, and I thought, what better example than the homily that Pope John Paul II gave during the canonization of St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Ooh, I like Maximilian Kolbe.
From today on, the Church desires to address as saint a man who was granted the grace of carrying out these words of the Redeemer in an absolutely literal manner. That is, greater love has no man than this, that a man may lay down his life for his friends. For towards the end of July 1941, when the camp commander ordered the prisoners destined to die of starvation to fall in line, this man, Maximilian Maria Kolbe, spontaneously came forward and declared himself ready to go to death in the place of one of them. This readiness was accepted, and after more than 2 weeks of torment caused by starvation, Father Maximilian's life was ended with a lethal injection on August 14th, 1941. All this happened in the concentration camp at Auschwitz, where during the last war some 4 million people were put to death, including the servant of God Edith Stein, who is now a saint, whose cause for beatification is in progress at the competent congregation. Disobedience to God, the creator of life, who said, "Thou shalt not kill," caused in that place the immense holocaust of so many innocent persons. And so, at the same time, our age has thus been horribly stigmatized by the slaughter of the innocent. Father Maximilian Kolbe, himself a prisoner of the concentration camp, defended in that place of death an innocent man's right to life. Father Kolbe defended his right to life, declaring that he was ready to go to death in the man's place, because he was the father of a family and his life was necessary for his dear ones. Father Maximilian Maria Kolbe thus reaffirmed the Creator's exclusive right over innocent human life. He bore witness to Christ and to love. For the Apostle John writes, "By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren." The Church has venerated Father Maximilian as blessed since 1971. By laying down his life for a brother, he made himself like Christ. Gathered today before the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, we wish to express the special value which Maximilian Kolbe's death by martyrdom has in the eyes of God. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. These are the words we have repeated in today's responsorial psalm. It is truly precious and inestimable. Through the death which Christ underwent on the cross, the redemption of the world was achieved. For this death was the value of supreme love. Through the death of Father Maximilian Kolbe, a shining sign of this love was renewed in our century, which is due seriously and in so many ways threatened by sin and death. In this canonization liturgy, there seems to appear before us that martyr of love of Auschwitzum, saying, "O Lord, I am thy servant. I am thy servant, the son of thy handmaiden. Thou hast loosed my bonds." And as though gathering together in one sacrifice the whole of his life, he, a priest and a spiritual son of St. Francis, seems to say, "What shall I render to the Lord for his bounty to me? I will lift up the cup of salvation and call to the name of the Lord." These are words of gratitude. Death undergone out of love, in the place of one's brother, is an heroic act of man. It is an act through which, together with the one already beatified, we glorify God. For from God comes the grace of such heroism, of this martyrdom. Therefore, let us today glorify God's great work in man. Before all of us gathered here, Father Maximilian Kolbe lifts up his cup of salvation, and in it is contained the sacrifice of his whole life, sealed at the martyr's death for a brother. Maximilian prepared for his definitive sacrifice by following Christ from the first years of his life in Poland. From these years comes the mysterious vision of 2 crowns, one white and one red. From these our saint does not choose, he accepts them both. From the years of his youth, in fact, Maximilian was filled with the great love of Christ and the desire for martyrdom. This love and this desire accompanied him along the path of his Franciscan and priestly vocation, for which he prepared himself both in Poland and in Rome. This love and this desire followed him through all the places of his priestly and Franciscan service in Poland and in his missionary service in Japan. The inspiration of his whole life was the Immaculata. To her he entrusted his love for Christ and his desire for martyrdom. In the mystery of the Immaculate Conception there revealed itself before the eyes of his soul that marvelous and supernatural world of God's grace offered to man. The faith and works of the whole life of Father Maximilian show that he thought of his cooperation with divine grace as a warfare under the banner of the Immaculate Conception. This Marian characteristic is particularly expressive in the life and holiness of Father Kolbe. His whole apostolate, both in his homeland and on the missions, was similarly marked with this sign. In Poland and in Japan, the centers of this apostolate were the special cities of the Immaculata. With that, we'll end the story. The homily goes on further. You can certainly go online to look it up. But a wonderful expression of the priesthood, and really the fact that all priests, in a sense, are martyrs. They're dying to themselves and dying to the world. That's what the black of the clerical represents. Mm-hmm. And it's a call to all of us to be martyrs as well, to put the old man to death, so that the new man might live.
And as any priest will tell you, that if you have a youth minister in your parish, you feel like you want to die anyway.
I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
You take it how you want, Jake.
You're negative.
I'm positive that I'm negative. Just kidding.
Yes.
I think that priests love youth ministers.
I think so, too.
I do, too.
Yeah.
That's why I said it in the first place.
We have 4 minutes left.
4 minutes. What do you even do with 4 minutes in a radio show?
Talk about how we only have 4 minutes left, which turns into 3, and then 2, and then 1, and then we're done.
It does work that way.
Yeah. We did that a couple weeks ago.
That only goes in one direction. Yeah, no, that was such a cold day. We hadn't done a radio show together in 3 weeks or something?
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah.
Oh, it's better to be together, Jake.
It is better to be together. Yes, this is true.
You know, I've been thinking about the diaconate myself.
You're a little young.
Well, I can start formation. The diocese website says 30. I'm 30.
That's right.
Could I go to the diaconate classes dressed in my Spider-Man outfit?
No.
I was thinking about all the honors.
So Spider-Man is a servant of humanity.
He is, and even says, to whom much is given, much is expected.
That's true.
Or something like that. Much power is given.
Yeah.
Or is it Uncle Ben who says that? I don't know. Somebody says
know.
that. I never really followed comic books.
Me neither.
Partly because my parents thought they were evil. I love you guys. But no, I was thinking about all the honorifics I'd have. Actually, when my students mentioned it, because I'd have.
How about we finish on the priesthood?
No, I will.
Not how great you are.
I will, because if I do everything I want, I would be Doctor, Reverend.
It would be Reverend Doctor.
Oh yeah,
priesthood comes first.
You're right, Reverend Doctor, Studi, Jonathan Studi, OP, MA, MDiv.
How would you be a Dominican?
Because you can be a third order Dominican.
Oh, these are things you want to be.
Yeah. I can be a third order Dominican and be married.
I think for this reason, you're probably not going to accomplish any of that because it would be too much of a temptation on your pride.
That, and I am an absolute positive failure. I'm just joking.
Wow.
I'm a disappointment of my own potential.
So, can we finish on the priesthood?
Yeah, we can.
We have 2 minutes left.
Okay, let's finish on the priesthood. What do you got to say?
I don't have anything, I don't think.
Well,
there's a lot we can say on the priesthood, but
tons.
I think the main thing is talking about male-only priesthood and the nature of priest. Maybe a quick 1-minute blurb on why celibacy is a good thing. It's small t tradition. It could be changed, but it's not likely to be.
Yeah. From my own experience.
Have any of you out there worked for the church? Try doing
being a youth minister and being married is insane. Couldn't imagine being a priest. I mean, it was sort of like, it drives me nuts that people say things like, with regards to the priest abuse scandal or whatever, that if only they could be married. Shut up.
That wouldn't solve it.
That wouldn't solve anything because, and if you look at the statistics, people who are married abuse at a higher rate than priests.
Right.
And besides that, in Protestant
Isn't the statistic in Protestant world that ministers actually abuse at a higher rate than priests?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The priests are one of the lowest in terms of percentage.
Right.
But not in terms of how much is reported. But there's also tons of other scandals that happen. People, cheating, divorces, big fights. The pastor's wife gets all sorts of like gossipy and throws her weight around in the parish because she's married to the head pastor or whatever.
Right.
So there's just other scandals that come into contact with that as well. So it is the case though in the Eastern rites, priests can be married.
Yes.
But bishops can't be married.
Right.
And they can't perform the marriage act the same day they say mass.
I don't know what you just said or what it exactly
the marital
means.
act. They can't have sex on the same day they had mass.
Oh, okay. The way you formulated it was confusing. But we're out of time. So, on behalf of Jonathan Studi, I'm going to cut his mic off now. This is Jacob Nelson for the Lost Voice radio program. Next week we will continue our philosophical endeavors in the sacraments with something to be determined. Thank you. God bless. Have a wonderful week. Email us at lostvoice@wcatradio.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.